Does living together as a couple before marriage increase your risk of divorce? This is a hugely contested debate right now. A lot of people say yes, a lot of people say no. And the research on this is actually interesting and conflicting. I'm going to be presenting here today exactly what you need to know about yes, living together, or no, not living together. By the end of this video, you will understand if cohabitation is right for you and what you're wanting to achieve and what the huge risks are in your relationships. I'm Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. I've been working with couples for a very long time now, and I have seen a lot of dynamics that you need to hear about so that you can get the best outcome and avoid that worst divorce. Let's dive in right now and talk about cohabitation, living together. So first, let's just address the elephant in the room. A lot of young people today are not getting married. That's why the divorce rates are actually going down, is because fewer people are getting married. But throughout many societies across the face of the earth, living together and moving in together actually was the marker of becoming married. So it might actually be that marriage itself is beginning to shift away from an elaborate formal ceremony where the state is involved, perhaps to more of a looser structure of living together. Now, that's not me saying that marriage is pointless. That's not me saying that at all. I've been married for 15 and a half years. I absolutely love the institution of marriage. Maybe not the state aspect of the state controlling it. I think there's other answers there, but I happen to know that marriage can be fantastic. And I think that avoiding marriage is one of the worst things that young people can do, because it can strap a rocket to your back and help you reach your goals so much faster than doing it by yourself. Living together, for some people, is almost like playing house. And that's not me dismissing that and saying that it's not a real relationship. What I'm going to say is this: moving in together has actually taken the place of getting married. People in the old days, throughout most of human history, got married fairly quickly, about 6 to 12 months maybe into the relationship, which is usually where a lot of couples are starting to move in together now. You are essentially almost getting married without any of the legal protections or any societal protections. And there's very less penalty if you tend to split up today than there was maybe in past relationships and throughout past history. But cohabitation, moving in together, almost is like getting married. This is why when you do get married, you do move in together, it seems to be leading toward higher expectations of a deeper sense of commitment. People today start dating, they become exclusive, they have sex at some point in that process. They tend to move in and commit together and cohabitate together. They may or may not have a child before marriage. They get engaged, then they get married. And if they didn't have a child before marriage, now they have a child after marriage. It's a whole sequence leading up to marriage of like 6 or 7 different steps. Cohabitation is along that for most people. Some people, the engagement process stops at cohabitation, and that is as close as they're willing to get to marriage. And we can talk about that a little bit, mismatched expectations later, but cohabitating certainly increases your expectations. So this can strain the relationship if one of you, maybe the avoidant person, is not looking for a long-term permanent commitment that involves the state, involves papers, involves legal liabilities. And if the other one, maybe an anxious person or a secure person, is looking for that deeper level of commitment in connection and is looking for a legal bonding between the two of you. If that's what you're looking for, this is going to raise the stakes. Moving in together could be the worst thing you could possibly do, especially if you're just doing it to appease the other person because it looks like you should commit and you should move the relationship forward. This is one of the worst things you can do, because now you have no way to get space from that person, no way to really divide from that person the way that you used to. And now you see them every single minute of every day. Now, yeah, hyperbole, but when you come home from work, there they are. When you're on a weekend, there they are. When you have a bad day, there they are. When you're exhausted, there they are. Can you retreat to a room and say, please leave me alone? Maybe. Or maybe they take that as a personal attack and start like clawing at the door, crying and sobbing their eyes out if they're more anxiously attached. And if you have said it in a horrible way and push them away, now you have to deal with that. This is why a lot of avoidant people, they tend to view cohabitation as a lethal risk against the relationship. And they usually cut off their relationships before it can reach cohabitation level. So those increased expectations are very real, and you need to manage those if you're considering moving in together. Now, testing compatibility. Cohabitation, it does provide an interesting opportunity to assess compatibility in daily life, potentially really bonding you through future pieces. helping prevent future conflicts, right? You see each other in your natural environment. You don't have anywhere to go, so you have to go forward. You have to resolve conflicts. You can't just separate from the other person for 3 days and not speak to them because they're right there on the other end of the couch. It does force a lot more conflict resolution or a lot of conflict explosions. It really is that crucible that you go through where it makes things so much more intense. So some people view cohabitation as a test for marriage, which I guess that is what that is. They decide, hey, let's test our marriage because so many marriages fail today. Let's see if we can even live together. Let's see what it's like to combine everything. Let's see what it's like to work together. If we can survive that, maybe then we'll consider marriage. Can you fault them for that? Now, some people argue that this weakens the institution of marriage. I don't think it does. I think that it is a very non-religious and not non-state focused way of doing it. There are a lot of laws on the books that if you happen to live together for 7 years or more, that you're considered in a commonwealth marriage, right? And you are bonded together and now you are effectively married. So beware of that, people out there, if you've lived together for extended periods of time. And that can actually change sometimes a year, 2 years. It depends on the area. So be aware. Sometimes just living together, you are considered legally married. So be aware of that. I don't think that this weakens marriage at all because I think that real, honest, fully connected, committed marriage has a very important place, especially within religious settings. But I think that nowadays, especially more and more, living together almost as a de facto marriage where you choose to move in together without anybody else being involved in the process. Again, I don't think this weakens the religious connection or the full-on institution of marriage. I will say that the research on this is interesting. If you cohabitate with multiple people and then get married to one person, your risk of divorce goes through the roof. The same as if you marry and divorce and then get married, your risks of divorce go up the same. So it seems to correlate in much the same way. When you cohabitate or get divorced, your risks of divorce go up. Does this mean that cohabitating is effectively like a marriage? It very much could be, and it does seem to leave the same impact later on. So I'm a little less concerned about that, to be honest, and a little more concerned with keeping couples together in a fully committed relationship. Now, where this gets tricky and where I really want to parse this out with people is sliding versus deciding. Some couples move in and cohabitate and say, well, we just won't talk about it. We're going to move in together and it's almost like we're married. And they unintentionally slide into marriage-like expectations without having any formal commitment. So she's like, he's my husband. And he's like, she is my housemate. like that vast difference right there. I have noticed that a lot of the people who are most fearful of making a long-term commitment tend to be avoidantly attached because they're afraid of the risks and they don't want to cause those problems. But the people who don't talk about those expectations are anxiously attached because they're afraid that they're going to disrupt the whole cycle and be told that they're not worth it. So they go in with secret expectations and the avoidant people go in with an absolute firm plan not to commit. And of course, those are going to detonate. So allowing people to simply move in together with no form of marriage whatsoever can lead to tremendous heartbreak down the road. Sometimes the old rules are the best because if you're going to live together, you should make this formal thing because it forces conversations. This is not me saying that people should be forced to get married, by the way, but I am saying very clearly here, I need to say this very clearly right into the microphone. If you are moving in together, instead of getting married and instead of having conversations, there's a serious problem. If you're at a place where you're ready to cohabitate, you probably are ready to get married. And it is right that you have that conversation and make sure that you aren't getting connected if you are not compatible in what you want. If one of you is dreaming of marriage and the other would rather chop off your arm, then you are going to have a serious problem and cohabitation will make that so much worse. So let me be clear here. The research, again, says that if you cohabitate with one person and then get married to that person down the road, your divorce rate actually doesn't seem to change, which is kind of interesting. If you cohabitate with one person, break up, and then cohabitate with another person, and then get married, your divorce rate definitely goes up. And the more people that you cohabitate with seems directly correlated to the marriage risks down the road of getting divorced. So again, it seems to track very similarly to previous marriages. Cohabitating seems to be marriage, whether people like it or not, whether people want to have that conversation. It's just that you don't have protections. You don't have things like shared custody of the things that you purchase in the home. Now you have to fight over them and scream about them. And the law is not going to protect you when you try to take the other person to court. You don't have to yell and scream at each other through lawyers who say, well, did you have any kind of agreement at all? Now it's he said, she said, and there's no laws built in to help you divvy up things when you break up. Now there's no protections. There's no legal protections. There's no child custody protections the same way in many states as if you were fully married. There's no all kinds of protections that are now missing. So you are getting all of the drawbacks of marriage in many cases without the protections of it, if you want to think about it that way. If you think that cohabitating and then breaking up is going to be easier than a divorce, odds are good it's probably not going to be, because now you don't have a structure for when you do have to get separated. You could just run off into the night laughing and screaming with a big bag of your stuff over your shoulder like Santa Claus, but odds are good your partner is now going to sue you in civil court. So it's probably not going to look good, just to be honest with you. Breaking up after cohabitation, really painful, really hard. It's basically like a divorce at that point, you guys. Now, why would people cohabitate instead of getting married? Why move in together at all? Well, a couple of reasons. One, they maybe aren't ready to make that full commitment because they watched their parents go through a vicious divorce and they are petrified of getting the state and the legal system involved. I fully understand. I really do. As much as I love marriage, I understand watching somebody get gutted and being gun shy of going into a relationship structure like that where there's a third party, the state, involved. I fully understand. And if you feel like relationships are just an absolute coin flip anyway, if you're afraid of that false 50-50 stat, then it makes perfect sense why you would be really nervous about making a religious or legal binding contract for life. I totally get that, you guys. People are going into this, even if they're resistant against that, they're going into this often for being together, the emotional bonding, the intimacy and connection, and yes, financial considerations. Guys, it's getting really expensive to live out there. I don't know if you've noticed, but a one-bedroom apartment is catastrophically expensive for one person. Now, a couple who are both working and contributing financially operates almost like one person because they can share one space. Now you have doubled your income, which is unfortunately what the American economy is built on, is everybody slaving away together to pay double what they were normally paying. Politics aside, now you have financial consideration, safety, financial stability. Again, not full safety because it's not recognized and you don't get the tax benefits, and then you're not actually fully safe financially inside that relationship, but you are able to at least pool your money and live together and share expenses. This is a reason a lot of people, when they're cohabitating, don't split up and they still live with that partner but go date other people. It's because they can't afford to move out. Once you're in a cohabitating structure, it's very difficult to move back out of it. And again, the breakup can happen that fast instead of a drawn out process where you have to try to fix it or you go through a separation or divorce process. So it can shift very rapidly. This leads to a lot of people dating and even sleeping with other people while they're still cohabitating with a partner and then sleeping with that partner too. So now they're sleeping with a new partner and the old partner. It's a really messy structure. I've seen it a lot. Just be aware. It can create a relationship imbalance down the road. Be cautious. Be nervous about this. That's my advice. Don't be afraid, but be nervous about the impacts of cohabitation on potential breakups. Those shared finances can impact decision-making and potentially lead to all kinds of conflicts. You're going to have discussions about who's spending money on what, looking at receipts, tracking things. Again, it's a lot easier if you're married because you can just have joint finances as long as you trust the person to do that. But making a commitment to pool your money and resources and home and live together anyway, again, this is basically like a marriage. So in many jurisdictions, cohabitation doesn't offer those same legal protections. Just be aware of that. A lot of women are going to be more sensitive to that than men are. A lot of men are absolutely devastated by the financial and legal systems out there right now. And I fully recognize that, you guys. I've got plenty of male friends and family members who are not as successful as I am, let's just say, in marriage. They married the wrong person or they have the wrong relationship skills and they're using them wrong. And they get utterly gutted in the financial systems, the family courts, divorce laws. They try to be too kind and then they get destroyed by a resentful ex who already has 3 boyfriends. There's all kinds of problems going on. I am very aware of that, you guys. If I ever sound like I have rose-colored glasses on, I'm trying to present the kindness and the goodness that I see because, again, I've worked with death penalty inmates. I've worked with the worst divorces and affairs you can imagine. If you have bad stories, I have 15 more bad stories that are worse than anything you've ever heard. So I'm aware of that fully. I'm just saying, if you're going to go in halfway, why are you going in halfway? Conversations need to be had. Okay. If you're wanting to do this because you don't believe in bringing the state in, I can understand. If you're doing this because you don't want to have the hard conversations, so this is to appease her and shut her up because she can kind of be sort of like your wife now, and this will prevent a conversation about marriage for 2 more years, really bad choice. Really bad choice, you guys. Now, this is especially true when you look at the way that cohabitation tends to interact with attachment styles. You knew attachment was coming. I'm the attachment specialist. This is the attachment channel. So here we go. Relationship dynamics, attachment styles, and cohabitation. Securely attached people, it's not that they don't cohabitate. It's that they cohabitate with only one person who is rightly selected for them and then get married. Okay. Or they go straight into marriage and they just do that pathway. It's one and done, and that's it, typically, because they tend to pick fairly early and pick properly. Or they remade secure, and then they say, I'm not doing that again. If I'm ready for a full commitment, I'm ready for a full commitment. And then they say, usually, instead of cohabitating, it's probably time to get married at 6 months to a year. So we'll just make that switch instead of doing all of this again. So we have the full legal protections and we've made a real commitment. That's usually what they're looking at. They're more likely to benefit from cohabitation as a step toward marriage. That one step, okay? Step up and then step in, if you want to think of it that way, rather than 15 people they've cohabitated with and then they try to marry one person when they're 40. That is really going to be catastrophic. I'm just going to tell you that. Anxiously attached people, they're really happy at first to cohabitate because it means the relationship's moving forward. And anxiously attached people are looking for any signal the relationship's moving forward. Pretty much anything makes them happy, right? He gave me an onion ring from his plate, and that's basically like a ring, and we're probably going to get engaged. Oh, this is so amazing, right? Like, that's that level of that deep connection of like anything that could be perceived as abandonment is bad. Anything that could be perceived as commitment is good. So getting into cohabitated relationships at first feel amazing, but then they start fostering insecure independence on those people with avoidant attachment style that you might have connected with, because now you're living with them and you want to spend all your time with them and they don't. They want to do some other things. It creates all kinds of problems if you don't have those conversations up front, which again, a lot of people who are just cohabitating are trying to avoid a lot of those conversations. Have the conversations and spare yourself the heartache. That's the number one thing you need to do. If you end up cohabitating after the conversations, hey, fair play. I'm not here to police that, but don't do it instead of having the conversations. That's what I tell you. Avoidantly attached people living together can definitely challenge their need for independence and emotional distance. They have a really hard time escaping. What I've seen a lot is they use their home as a way to get away from most people. Then they choose begrudgingly to cohabitate instead of getting married. It's like an appeasement. And now they have no more room to run away. So then they spend it in their car, in a parking lot somewhere, or at like some other place, or they try to find a place to be utterly alone in their fortress of solitude, but they can't fly to the Arctic Circle like Superman. So instead they have to find somewhere else to be alone. And it's really hard. When they get stressed out, they have to push back on the anxious person who treats it like a violation of trust, or like they're being abandoned or they're being rejected. So then it creates this massive tension. I've seen cohabitation turn really ugly when that's the case. Making sure you have a space for the avoidant person to get away and they're able to send a signal to be able to go away from you for a while, like, hey, chupacabra, okay, no problem, take some time alone, right? Or, hey, it would mean a lot to me if you could give me some time. Like these days, Thursday nights, I really need on my own. You know, the other nights I'm happy to spend with you. Build a structure like that. Make sure, again, that you are having the conversations inside your cohabitating relationship instead of avoiding them. This will shut her up kind of thing. The kind of guy that buys her a dog so he doesn't have to have a baby with her, kind of stuff like that, right? Don't do that. Don't avoid. Have the conversations. Otherwise, this cohabitation is just going to make the expectations so much worse. And when it comes to disorganized people, I'm not going to say that they're too chaotic to be able to cohabitate or that the relationships don't last long enough to cohabitate, because it's actually the opposite. Disorganized people tend to move in, especially loud disorganized people tend to move in extremely fast, quite often. Not always, but quite often they move in after like 2 months of knowing somebody, or 1 month. And they are so in a rush to like get committed as fast as humanly possible before the fun wears off. And then they do, and then they start freaking out because they don't actually know this person. Now they're cohabitating in a space with someone they don't know. They haven't built trust on it. Everything is based on emotions and feelings in the moment. Now they're panicking and they're cohabitating during a process when they should be compatibility testing. Now you have to compatibility test with somebody that you're already sharing finances with and sleeping in the same bed and sharing toenail clippers with. And that is just a horrible process and a horrible level of tension. This is why a lot of disorganized people cohabitate multiple times. And it could be why we see a correlation with cohabitating multiple times and then getting married and divorce rates. It might actually be that the relationship structures they're building are the problem, if that makes sense. So in the end, is cohabitation a bad, evil thing instead of getting married? Well, I tend to say if you're ready to cohabitate, you're probably ready to get married. Right? If you're going to move in together, share finances in some way, whether it's full joint accounts or just sharing finances as a household. If you're ready to form that connection as a couple, sleep next to each other, share toenail clippers, brush your teeth every night with each other, watch each other get sick and throw up in the bathroom. If you're there to wash each other's underwear and fold laundry while you're watching a TV show, if you're there day and night and sharing those spaces, what is the problem with taking that next step into marriage? What does that step into marriage represent to you? Why does it represent so much fear or so much resistance? Again, if it's the state thing, okay, that I can even understand, but there are ways to have marriages that are different from that, right? There's religious weddings. There's other pieces. Why not take that extra step? What does the extra step represent to you? This is not me here to shame anybody who's cohabitating. I fully understand things happen, okay? But are you doing it instead? Are you doing it instead of having questions and conversations? Are you doing it instead because you're afraid of marriage? Are you doing it because you don't trust your partner? Are you doing it because you don't trust anybody? Are you giving into it because you're afraid to ask for what you really want? Are you giving into it because you secretly hope it's a step toward that marriage that you haven't talked about? A lot of cohabitation relationships are missing so many vital pieces, and they're just half a step away from marriage that in many cases could provide a lot more safety and stability for that couple going forward. My question is, why not get married? And if you're going to cohabitate with someone you don't trust, probably a bad choice anyway. I would never cohabitate with somebody that I wasn't ready to get married to and that I didn't trust not to rake me across the coals in a bad relationship structure or in the state or in the courts or custody or whatever it might be. I wouldn't have married my wife if I wasn't ready to cohabitate with her and trust her. That just wouldn't have happened. So don't get married or cohabitate with anybody who is a risk to that extent. Understand them, compatibility test, and know them, and then really challenge your fears about marriage, you guys. Again, this is not me out here to judge or shame anybody for cohabitating. I just want to make sure that you're not settling. That's all. So when you go forward in your relationships, keep your eyes open, have conversations, and ask some important questions. Let me know in the comments. Are you cohabitating? Is it going well? Have you cohabitated in the past? Did it go well? Let me know. I would love to talk to you in the comments. I will be there. I will be replying. So please, 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 let's have this conversation. I'm Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe as we share this channel here together. And let's talk.